10 Tales of Christmas, Chapter 12, Cosette's Christmas. Cosette, a little orphan girl, is a servant in the Thénardiers' tavern. They abuse her and make her life miserable. One Christmas evening, several men, wagon drivers, and peddlers were seated at table and drinking around 4 or 5 candles in the low hall of the Thénardier Inn. This room resembled all taverns: tables, pewter mugs, bottles, drinkers, smokers, little light, and much noise. The date was 1823, however, indicated by the two things then in style in middle-class families. On the table were a kaleidoscope and a fluted tin lamp. Thénardier, the wife, was looking to the supper, which was cooking before a bright blazing fire. The husband, Thénardier, was drinking with his guest and talking politics. Cosette was at her usual place, seated on the crosspiece of the kitchen table near the fireplace. She was clad in rags. Her bare feet were in wooden shoes, and by the light of the fire she was knitting woolen stockings for the little Thénardiers. Cosette was musing sadly, for though she was only 8 years old, she had already suffered so much that she mused with the mournful air of an old woman. Cosette was then thinking that it was late in the evening, that the bowls and pitchers in the rooms of the travelers who had arrived must be filled immediately, and that there was no more water in the cistern. Mrs. Thénardier raised the cover of a kettle which was boiling on the range, then took a glass and hastily approached the cistern. She turned the faucet. The child had raised her head and followed all her movements. A thin stream of water ran from the faucet and filled the glass half full. "Here," she said, "there is no more water." And then she was silent for a moment. The child held her breath. Mrs. Thénardier threw the street door wide open. "Well, go after some." Cosette hung her head and went for an empty bucket that was by the chimney corner. The bucket was larger than she, and the child could have sat down in it comfortably. Mrs. Thénardier went back to her range and tasted what was in the kettle with a wooden spoon, grumbling all the while. "There's some at the spring. She is the worst girl that ever was. I think 'twould have been better if I'd left out the onions." Then she fumbled in a drawer where there were some pennies, pepper, and garlic. "Here, Mademoiselle Toad," added she, "get a big loaf at the baker's as you come back. Here's 15 sous." Cosette had a little pocket in the side of her apron. She took the piece without saying a word and put it in that pocket. Then she remained motionless, bucket in hand, the open door before her. She seemed to be waiting for somebody to come to her aid. "Get along!" cried Mrs. Thénardier. Cosette went out. The door closed. There was a fair in the village with all sorts of booths. The last of these stalls, set up exactly opposite Thénardier's door, was a toy shop, all glittering with trinkets, glass beads, and magnificent things in tin. In the first row, right in front, the merchant had placed, upon a bed of white napkins, a great doll, nearly 2 feet high, wearing a dress of pink crepe. It had golden birds on its head, and real hair and enamel eyes. At the moment when Cosette went out, bucket in hand, all gloomy and overwhelmed as she was, she could not help raising her eyes toward this wonderful doll, toward the lady, as she called it. The poor child stopped petrified. She had not seen this doll so near before. This whole booth seemed a palace to her. This doll was not a doll, it was a vision. She gazed upon this beautiful pink dress, this beautiful smooth hair, and she was thinking how happy that doll must be. In this adoration she forgot everything, even the errand on which she had been sent. Suddenly, the harsh voice of Mrs. Thénardier called her back to reality. "How, Jade! Haven't you gone yet? Hold on, I am coming for you. I'd like to know what she's doing there. Little monster, be off!"